Great Teams podcast. Today we have with us Tammy Beaumont, MBE, and one of the leading lights of the English women's cricket game. She won the World Cup in 2017. She has been awarded an MBE in 2018, and in 2019 she was the Wisden Cricketer of the Year. She holds the highest ever score by an English female cricketer. And in this episode, we're going to talk about individual performance and team performance and the journey of the English women's cricket team as they started their World Cup run in 2017, culminating in them winning the World Cup, and what that felt like, the processes and structures that underpinned their performance, and how that has moved the England women's cricket game on. Tammy, thank you so much for coming on the Building Great Teams podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me on.
For those who are not familiar with your career, I don't know how that could be anybody in the UK at the moment. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your background and what's brought you here.
Yes, I'm Tammy Beaumont, England women's cricketer, World Cup winner in 2017. And basically grew up in Kent, cricket mad family. My older brother and my dad both playing at a local cricket club, and I got bored of watching and helping mum write the teas and started practicing with the lads down there, and fell in love with the game, and eventually made my England debut at the age of 18. Was probably too early for me. I wasn't actually ready for the pressures and what it meant to play international cricket, but certainly caught the bug and went away. Ended up in and out of the England team for a good 6 years. And then the change of coach coming in, a guy called Mark Robinson came in, and since he kind of came in, that was almost, well, we used to joke back then, it was almost like Tammy 2.0 of before Mark Robinson's era. I probably didn't justify the contract I was getting and being part of that squad at times, but actually since then, I was player of the tournament in the World Cup that we won, scoring the most number of runs. I eventually in 2020 was ranked number one in the world ODI batting rankings for a very short period of time, but almost, a tale of two halves with my career of kind of constantly evolving, and I've been part of the England team for nearly 14 years now.
Good Lord, that's incredible. Well, I'm going to touch on some of those milestones as we go through this podcast. And we're going to talk a bit about that World Cup team, because I think that was a fascinating and fantastic period for women's cricket. But one of the things that is quite curious is obviously the women's cricket game has become it's got much bigger publicity over the course of the last 10 years and is doing astonishing things, especially in England. But when you started out, presumably there wasn't the structures available for women's cricket that there now are. What was it like for you? Take us through those early years when you first started to get into cricket, and where were you playing and who with?
Yeah, I mean, my mum tells the story, actually. We had a touring team come to play at my men's club where my dad was playing, and one of the players was one of the opposition players was throwing a ball at me on the outfield, and I was just hitting it, and apparently I told him, I'm going to play cricket for England. And he was like, oh, is there a women's team? And I said, I don't know, I'm playing for the men.
Yes. Not going to be bound by that structure.
8 or 9, I didn't believe in anything to do with genders. If you were good enough, you were going to play. For me, that kind of I had that tenacity from the beginning, but the pathway wasn't particularly easy. I did get I played boys cricket from the age of 8. Luckily I had my older brother and some really close friends that kind of looked after me in that sense, being the only girl pretty much playing in the whole of the league. Sometimes some comments were a little bit difficult to take, but I felt very supported both by my dad, who was the coach, my brother, who was the captain, and his core group of mates that really had my back.
Was that controversial for the team at the time, having a girl in the team, because that was such a different period of time?
Yeah, I think it was met with some opposition at times, both from within the club, just people having not seen it before. It was just something different. They weren't sure that a girl should be playing. Could I, particularly, cricket's played with a very hard ball. Could I put up with it? Would I be okay with it? I was very lucky that, well, it was my mum really in the beginning. My dad was short, trying to get an 11 side out, and he was ringing people around. He started calling up like the 7-year-olds and like, oh, can your younger brother play? And I kind of looked down the list, and this probably shows I was a little bit of a precocious 8-year-old, but I was like, Dad, I can bat better than him and I can bowl better than him. Like, why can't I play? And my mum sat there next to her and she's like, well, she's right. Why can't she play? And that was the beginning of it, really. But a couple of years later, you realise there is a women's pathway. It's just a little bit harder to find. Had trials with Kent under-11s, girls team. So kind of had to juggle playing both girls and boys. The standard of the girls wasn't actually as good as the boys, which is probably what accelerated my development. And actually being, you were in that environment as a girl, as a young woman, and you were being kind of judged more harshly. Like, people knew about you. So your performances were scrutinised. I couldn't just be good enough to play. I had to almost be pushing to be one of the better players. There could never be any doubt as to my place in that team, because me being a woman or me being a girl would have been the deciding factor of like, no, she shouldn't play. For me, a lot of the times you do home and away fixtures and you turn up for the first game and it'd be, you hadn't played this team before, and it'd be, they must be rubbish. They've got a girl playing. And that to me was like a red rag to the bull. I'm like, I will show you. I will show you how good we are.
And where were you batting in the order at this point?
Oh, it was, boys cricket. It's just everyone gets a bit of a go over the season. I don't think it was too long before I probably ended up, at the top of the order, opening or kind of number 3. But we had quite a few good players, a few actually that have gone on to higher honours. A guy called Sam Northeast, who's played an awful lot of county cricket and at that age was touted as the next big England player. So when he came back from school for the summer, he normally took my place at the top of the order, which was fair enough, but always in and around that bit. But yeah, then kind of you go back again at the end of the season and it'd be like, oh no, that girl's playing again. Oh, this game's gonna be hard. And so for me, that was the real kind of motivator. It was almost kind of proving people wrong and proving that I deserved to be where I was.
And that's quite an interesting one there from a psychological perspective, because I know working with many athletes that the desire to impress a parent is quite often one of the first sort of motivators, and it manifests in different forms throughout a career, but one of the first motivators. But it sounds like your parents were actually quite supportive and pushing you to achieve. It was more the fact you were fighting a societal position. Is that what it felt like, or was there an element of parental desire to prove parents wrong?
Yeah, I almost had the complete opposites with my parents. My mum just was like, oh, well done, did you have fun? Just really supportive, very much, that nurturing style. She'll mother anyone, my mother, she's brilliant. My dad is a little bit more, he played club cricket, and the biggest thing I admire about him, and so my older brother, technically brilliant batter. We were lucky we got a lot of coaching. My parents could afford to get us one-to-one coaching. He had a brilliant technique, very talented. My dad, more scrappy, more get the bit between his teeth, you'll get me out over my dead body. And I'm kind of a mixture of the two. My technique is not as good as my older brother Michael's was. Certainly wasn't growing up, but I had that nugget of mental resilience and strength that I'm like, no, I'm gonna fight here, and I'm gonna be, we end up saying a bit of a mongrel, like biting at your ankles, that type of thing. So when it came to my dad being coach early days, we clashed quite a lot, and he was obviously just trying to, help me progress and, spur me on to improve and get better and constantly be better. But I actually ended up playing a lot of men's cricket with him. He chose to be captain and bat lower down the order, even though he was still more than good enough. But he wanted the young players, myself included, to go out there, make mistakes, kind of, if we did well, we'd set the game up brilliantly. If not, he could kind of pick up the pieces coming in at number 7 and rescue us more often than not. But the number of times we had some arguments, because he was like, you look great, you got to 30 and then you just gave your wicket away, and you were batting brilliantly. If you'd have batted another 20 overs, we'd have got enough. Like, what were you doing? And I was like, oh, just shut up, Dad. Like, I know what I was doing. But I look back now and he was, it pains me to say it, but he was right every single time. And things that it took me almost too long to learn, too long to quite realise. And I think even in my England career, almost now, I look back and think, yeah, if I'd have thought more like my dad at the time, I probably would have progressed a lot sooner than I did.
I've had this with athletes before, where they have something so clearly in their mind from a young age, sort of 6, 7, 8 years of age, as you've described, and then they make it, whether that's playing for England or playing internationally generally, and there's almost this, oh right, now I'm here, what do I do? Like, how do I actually achieve in this environment? They've not really ever imagined that point. It's just getting there and getting that symbol of achievement, being in the England team. Was there an element of that came into your mind at the time, or retrospectively looking back?
Yeah, I think looking back, that's definitely how it felt. I I think it meant so much to be playing for England that almost when I was playing for Kent, I was very safe, I was very comfortable, knew how to interact with other people, knew how everyone worked, knew how we worked, knew what I needed to do. I'd get to England and it was just the nerves just absolutely crippled me. I almost was just frozen.
During a match or just in that environment?
No, in the matches. Normally I'd kind of score quite a lot of runs for Kent. I'd score enough runs for England Academy, get selected, and it'd be like, oh great, I'm back, here we go again. But then I'd kind of get that opportunity and just kind of not show what I was maybe doing elsewhere, not ever really convert anything that I was doing away from that into the international stage. And that then led to a lot of doubt and a lot of spiraling, belief in whether I could actually do it. I think at one point I played in the Ashes in 2013 and I'd been, out the team, then got back in the team for the Ashes, batted in a position that's slightly different to what potentially was my strength. I'd got put down at kind of 6 in the batting order, whereas I'd had all my success pretty much opening the batting. And I just remember playing one game at Lords actually, and I go out to bat at 6 and I think we need 6 and over or whatever it is. A couple of wickets go down while I'm at the crease. There might have been a run out. I can't remember whose fault it was. Probably 50-50, probably mine, who knows. But I remember thinking, and this is quite clear, the worst thing to be thinking, if I don't win us this game from here, I'm getting dropped again. I'm not going to play the rest of this Ashes. Lo and behold, not long later, I get out, we lose the game, and I just kind of break down. I just remove myself from the situation, from the changing room. I'm someone who didn't really do emotions in that environment at that point. I'd kind of hide how I was feeling, and I headed out onto this balcony up at Lords and just kind of cried my eyes out. And the assistant coach at the time, Carl Crowe, he noticed, and we were quite close. He was my one-to-one coach away from that through winters and whatnot. And he kind of came out and we had this conversation, and I said, am I even good enough to be here? Like, should I just give up? Should I just not bother? I feel like I'm never going to show what I can do. Like, I just don't think I'm good enough to do international cricket. I'm going to get dropped, this, that and the other. And he kind of said, right, well, look, I don't know what's going to happen with the team next game. We can't control that. But after this series, let's go away. Let's have a think about what you really want to achieve in cricket. What do you want to do? Do you want to continue? Do you want to keep going? And yeah, a month or so later, we met at a coffee shop in Loughborough. And I literally was like, well, I kind of want to be the number 1 batter in the world. And I was like embarrassed to say it. He had to literally pull
because you don't believe it yet.
Pull teeth to get it out. And he said, okay, and how are we going to get there? And over the course of the next couple of months, we came up with a plan. And he's like, well, what are you not doing right now? Like, what's stopping you getting there? What is it? And there was loads of different things. And I remember there was a bit of a grid that had kind of, tactical, technical, physical, mental, all of these kind of things. And I had to rate myself and I had to say, well, what do the world's best do? What do the world's best do? And then trying to create little steps to kind of get there. And actually along the way, over the years, that's obviously 10 years ago now, I think, I started to get better. I started to, I performed in 2017, got player of the tournament, held my place in the team for a long time. And it got to the point that goal kind of just disappeared. I was like, I'm not going to achieve it because I can't control what Smriti Mandhana of India does, who's absolutely outstanding. Meg Lanning, who is a one-in-a-generational talent. I can't beat those people, but I can just be as good as I can. And then almost by the time it happened in 2020, it was like so far off my radar that I was like, oh, that's nice. I completely forgot that was the goal for a bit, but I would never have got anywhere near it if it hadn't have been for that intervention. Yeah,
I mean, in business and I have a background in psychology and counselling training. We would often call that sort of a pattern break. So you take where we are right now, the pattern is not generating what I want. what it needs to be and what the patterns need to be, and then looking at the two as a sort of almost a gap analysis between there. Here, I'm doing a lot of gesticulation with my hands, which won't come across on the podcast, but between here and where I want to be in the future. You sort of, there's a moment in time or milestones in time that almost really become recognizable retrospectively, because you don't notice them at the time quite often. When you look back, can you remember sort of milestones where the pattern had changed, where you thought, oh, that's not happening to me anymore. I'm not a bag of nerves. I'm not worrying about the worst possible outcome anymore. Retrospectively, can you see that on moments in time that might have been symbols for you?
Yes, there's some. So not long after that, the first intervention, the kind of first month or so working on it, I went out to the West Indies, and it was I was probably a little bit lucky to go. There's a couple of injuries, and actually the first game I played was the first time I got player of the match, and I went in at number 5 and was not out at the end. I don't know how many I got, but like essentially won as the game with a couple other batters, and that was like, oh, okay, this has kind of worked. Yeah. But then between that, it was almost few and far between again, because it was like, kind of stabbing in the dark at like, well, what did work there?
Yes.
But then it was 3 years later when Mark Robinson came in, and I felt like that was just a second chance. It was kind of, this is a chance that I've got to grab with 2 hands and kind of take it and run with it. Like whatever he wants me to do, I'm going to just do. I'm just going to try and morph into whatever he wants, whatever he sees, that I'm going to grab onto it, because it's someone with fresh eyes, someone who hasn't necessarily seen everything that's gone before. He's just going to see you as you are right now. And I felt like I'd changed so much in those kind of 3 years from underperforming and bit of a waste of talent, really, to actually no, now I'm ready for this. I'm actually ready to take this opportunity. And he made it quite simple. I think he saw something in me that probably other coaches maybe hadn't, and he definitely invested more time with me as a young player than anyone probably had before, as a head coach at least. And he kind of took a bit of a gamble on me in a T20 World Cup. We played some warm-up games, and it actually was by chance. We got an extra warm-up game because Pakistan couldn't fly to India when they were meant to have their warm-up game, so we just got this extra game. And he rested Charlotte Edwards, who was captain, and he was like, go on, Tammy, you have a go opening the batting. I think I got 50 or whatever, and unfortunately the person that had been opening with Charlotte didn't get any runs in the 3 warm-up games she played. She was like, right, well, you're going to have a go. Charlotte ended up being our leading run scorer in that game, but we had set some quite good partnerships together, and my role kind of went from go out there, take the pressure off Lottie and get us off to a flyer, win the power play. That's your job. Go out there and just win the power play. And then there's a few times where I got out the power play and kind of didn't know what to do because that hadn't been told.
Yes. Oh, I'm still here.
But then, okay, so I've had a bit of success at that. Right, so win the power play, still the main objective. But if you get out the power play, do this, keep going. Yep. Take it as long as possible, keep being positive. And it almost kept being like, right, next thing. Yep. It wasn't a million things at once. It was like, this is your role, this is what I want you to do. And I remember him saying, if you get out at court mid-off, being aggressive, first ball, I'll clap you off the pitch. If you get out, nudging it around, trying to hit singles, being like 2 off 11, then we got issues. Then we might drop you. Then we might have to look at other things. So it was quite clear, this is what we're aiming for, and this is an acceptable failure, and this is an unacceptable failure. Yeah. It made it very clear in my mind, even though I was nervous, even though I was feeling that nerves, it was, no, it's okay to get this wrong. Yep. If I get it wrong in that way. If I don't do what he's asked me to do and go with the nerves, then that's not acceptable.
There's a clarity in that bravery that I really like, and it's a running theme across multiple sports at the moment, especially in the England cricket team with the Baz Ball approach, which I absolutely love, because I don't think it's, perhaps I'm being a terrible stereotype here of the British people, but I don't think it's a natural trait for us in Britain to be brave in sporting environments. Well, certainly when I was growing up, we were sort of, the story or narrative around British sport was always close failure or heroic failure, whereas, and the problem with that growing up in sport when I was coming through was that it was very much almost accepted that was the limit, and now there's this push for bravery. It's better to lose trying to achieve and going for it than accepting and nudging the singles, or however we might describe it.
Well, I just think, listening to you there, I know we're going to go on to the World Cup, but something that became incredibly important to us as a team in that time was Mark Robinson loved to bring in like quotes and TED Talks and all sorts, but the one that we really connected to was the man in the arena quote.
I love that one. Yeah.
It's not the critic who counts. It's the doer of deeds and all that kind of language. And that kind of, for me, really resonated. It's like throughout that time as well, not just my own personal journey, but we went from being completely amateur. I was at university. Lots of people were working other jobs. 2014, I think it was, we finally got professional contracts. And that just kind of changed overnight. We went from, training in lunch breaks, mornings, evenings, weekends, to this is our full-time job. And it actually took us probably 3 years to realise what being professional actually was. It wasn't working 9 to 5. It wasn't training in the nets from 9 to 5. Actually, it's a way of thinking. And what came with that was a lot of media scrutiny now. Why has Tammy Beaumont got a contract? She averages 10.
Yep.
Why is this person playing? This person's not performing. And that switch, I think, was the hardest, to go from thinking as an amateur to thinking as a professional. And I think that's why that man in the arena quote really stuck with us, because, it went from, it doesn't matter what the media say. It doesn't matter what people that are not in our immediate circle, what they think. It doesn't matter. What we're doing and what we're about is looking at each other and going, right, can we have each other's backs? And can we say, right, like, we'll do it for them, and all of those kind of things. I think that's what really kind of connected us.
Talk to us a little bit about that early phase then of coming together before the World Cup. So you've gone through a process of professionalism, you're coming into the World Cup. What's going through your mind? Did you know you were going to be selected, and was the group relatively consistent as a group at that stage or not?
Yeah, so I guess probably got to take it back to, so we played in the 2016 T20 World Cup in India, and we crashed out of the tournament in the semi-final against Australia, and Mark Robinson had only come in a few months before, and he said it to our face as well. He said it in the dressing room, and then he went into the press and he essentially said the girls aren't fit enough and they crumble under pressure. And it was tough to hear, but at the same time, like, looking at it, he was completely right. We then come back to England, and he a couple months later, it was like, right, we're starting our journey to Lords, and the final was 2017 at Lords, home World Cup, and he made the decision to remove Charlotte Edwards as captain, and she chose to then retire because of that. A couple of other players got told that they were not going to be kind of featuring in the next year or so of international cricket, so there was a couple of people that kind of unfortunately were lost on the journey, and at the time that was a brave decision. Charlotte Edwards is quite possibly still got most of the records for leading run scorer, most successful captain, one of the most successful England women's cricketers ever, and even had still been highest run scorer for our team at that World Cup. And we were so heavily reliant on her, but it almost was at the detriment of some of the younger players taking responsibility, growing in their roles, and actually performing more consistently. So it was a very brave decision, and I actually had to clear out of my house a month or so ago and found an article that was written at the time, and about Charlotte Edwards leaving, and the last line was like, who knows if this decision will prove fruits for England? If so, by this time next year at the World Cup, we'll see the likes of Amy Jones, Lauren Winfield, and maybe even Tammy Beaumont taking key roles in the batting lineup. And I found that quite funny, to be honest, looking back with hindsight.
Even Tammy Beaumont.
Even me, because at that point, no one would have written me in. So then we had a series against Pakistan. Heather Knight gets announced as captain, and everything's more than just we're taking on Pakistan, ranked kind of 6th or 7th in the world. It's right, this is our journey that we're going on. We've got to get fitter, we've got to get better under pressure, we've got to communicate better, we've got to have a list of we created these lists of professional standards of how we're going to talk to each other on the pitch, how we're going to learn about each other. We did
sorry to interrupt, but that was done by the players or the coach or a combined group?
So the coaches led it, and we had a sports psychologist come in and lead quite a lot of this. But a lot of the answers came from us as players. They were all kind of, on the pitch, off the pitch, just professional standards, all these different things. We did some work on something called Spotlight, which is your personality traits, but how they also relate under pressure or in a kind of work situation. So you end up with these 4 kind of different types, and then how do you interact with, say, your opposite type? So before that, she won't mind me saying, Anya Shrubsole, who's recently retired, her and I were complete opposites, and at times it was like we just couldn't understand each other. I knew that I annoyed her, and I just, in the end, it was like, well, I won't hang out with Anya too much. After that, she was one of my best friends in the team, because we actually learnt, right, she knew I'd probably tell some story, not be very concise, kind of very Duracell bunny up and about, whereas she needed to be a little bit more to the point. If I needed to get something out of Anya, I needed to be quite direct, and she needed to allow me to elaborate on some of my stories and be a little bit more emotional in how I was doing things. And that just meant that over the course of that year, we just got to know each other inside out, and we knew each other at our best, but also at our worst. And there was a bit more wiggle room in kind of it wasn't just they're having a bad day. It was like, right, okay, how do we make this bad day an okay day? How do we make an okay day a good day? How do we make a good day a great day? And we kind of, going into that World Cup, one person, you could tell if they were off, and there would be 4 or 5 people that knew how to help them out. And that could be, fluctuating throughout a day, throughout a tournament. And I think that was probably our biggest strength, that it wasn't just, individuals performing on a day and people being in great form or anything like that. It was actually, right, how do we communicate as a team? How do we help that person out? How do we help our sisters out? It was all about the sisterhood and that kind of thing. And it's kind of, looking back, it was a great way to do things.
So take us right up to the sort of 3-4 weeks before the first match. What was the feeling in the camp? Did you feel like, we're going to do this? Did it feel... How was it? What was the level of belief?
Actually, I think there was a few little wobbles at that point. We'd actually gone really well. We'd beaten Pakistan. We actually had really comprehensively beaten them. It was all about breaking boundaries, breaking new records, and I think we'd smashed a lot of records in that. Highest total, all these things we wanted to do. We'd then gone away, been successful at a successful tour of Sri Lanka, had a really tough series against the West Indies where it was a 5-match series and it went to 2-2. And I think the 4th game we had something like 5 run-outs. It was an absolute disaster of a run chase. We were ahead of the game, and then just kind of signs of that India semi-final of just like, finding a way to lose from a winning position. But we had a group meeting, and it was players only. We actually had a camera crew following us for this tour of Sri Lanka and the West Indies, and we shut the camera crew out, and it was like, right, what's happening? Why is this happening? Why did we have 5 run-outs? Why was there chaos? Why was this...
was it as polite as that?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, okay.
It was
the standards.
Standards. It was very honest. It was a very safe place to be. You were allowed to be vulnerable. At times, there's always tears. Almost always tears. But no, we got to the crux of it, and it was like, right, well, I felt the pressure. Well, did I talk to you? No, I didn't. What did I say? All this kind of thing. I need a bit more of this from you. When we back together, I need to know what the ball's doing. I don't want to talk about cricket. All these different people having those kind of tough conversations. And then, we won that series 3-2. So it was a great kind of comeback and showing that grit that we needed to find a way to win in difficult conditions. But fast forward a few months, and actually, some of our best players were coming back from injury. Sarah Taylor at the time, who had actually, she's one of the best players in the world, one of the most talented cricketers you've probably ever seen. She took a break for mental health issues for the whole of that year, so we hadn't had her, but we knew she was coming back, and she hadn't played any international cricket, so could she cope with it? Could she deal with that? We also had to learn how to welcome Sarah back, how to, it sounds horrible, but deal with Sarah's issues. There was some things she couldn't do, and some days she couldn't come and do this media appearance. She couldn't do these things, but we had to allow her the space and the trust to get on with that. And it was the same, I think we were all treated as individuals and treated slightly differently, but with the same purpose and standards to meet within that. And I think it was handled pretty well at the time. But she was coming back. Our captain, Heather Knight, who'd been brilliant and really key for us, had a stress fracture in her foot that had meant she was pretty off feet. I was quite out of form from the year before. So actually there was quite a few concerns, and I think maybe even Catherine Brunt, our leading wicket taker, was a bit injured and all of these kind of things. And I actually remember having a camp up at Loughborough, and the coaching staff was just making us feel quite stressed, and we were all stressed, and it was kind of toys out the bag and tears at times. And I was very close with Mark Robinson, so the girls were kind of like, Tammy, tell him that he's stressing us out. Like, he needs to check. Like, I feel like we can't win the World Cup with the way he doesn't think we can win the World Cup. And I'm like, all right, okay, well, I'll go. I'm 24 years old, actually one of the more junior members of this squad. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go and, I'll talk to Ali first, the assistant coach. But yeah, Ali.
Did you prep?
Oh, I did kind of have a few things. Ali, I think like the girls are getting really stressed out and it's not helping the way things are running and da-da-da. And he's like, right, well, you've got to tell Robbo yourself. I was like, oh, okay. So I literally sat with Robbo, and he was incredibly kind in that he levelled with me and he said, well, actually, yeah, I am a bit worried that we can't win the World Cup. He listed all the things that I've just told you, the injuries, the worries, the pressures we were under. And I said, we had this conversation. He was like, so what is it that I need to change, and what is it that we need to kind of do? And I was like, well, I think we just need to create a more calm environment. Let's just see what we can do and have that kind of conversation. So yeah, a few weeks out, we weren't necessarily feeling that confident, but the whole idea was always that we were on a journey as a team. And we were, it might have been too soon, this World Cup. As a group of players, maybe we hadn't quite gone as far as we needed to go in order to be able to do it. But the whole idea was we're going to give it a red hot crack and see how far we got. And things became labelled like Sing Our Song at Lords and all of these things. But I think we were as prepared as we could be. I think we'd been on a tour of Lords about 3 months before, which seemed a bit silly at times, but actually we'd barely played there, and it's quite an intimidating place, particularly the pavilion. There's quite a lot of staircases going off from the home dressing room, so we kind of practiced the walk to the middle, because I think the first time I played there I nearly got lost. And we had Alex Danson, the captain of the GB hockey team, come in and talk to us for about an hour, because they'd just won gold in Rio the year before. So she was talking a lot about the things that they had done, which we actually probably stole quite a few of them. We stole things from that All Blacks book as well, about sweeping the sheds. I think nothing in sport's particularly original these days, but we always just took little snippets from other teams. So we were as prepared as we could be, but I think there was always that little wobble and those doubts.
So I've got the sort of list of games to get you to the final, and there's a couple looking at the scores that were so close. I'm looking specifically at the Australia game number 5, and the semi-final against South Africa. Were they games during the game that you felt you were going to win, or did any of those doubts from before surface in game?
So I think we started the World Cup against India at Derby, and actually we lost. And we played in a way that was quite timid and quite shy and quite reminiscent of previous kind of a year or so ago. It mirrors similarly a little bit to the England men's 2019 World Cup win, where actually they had that big meeting, I think after one of the losses, I think it was maybe Sri Lanka, and they spoke about getting back to what had got them there. And we did the same. It was, Robbo used to say, no plan survives first enemy contact. And it was almost, we had to go back to what had made us play well and what we'd been talking about. And it was always about, if we're under pressure, we punch back, we take the positive option. we tried to take the game forward, all these kind of things, and we realised that potentially in that game we'd gone back and we'd gone a bit nervous and hadn't given the best account of ourselves. So we were probably lucky that after that we played some of the lesser teams in the tournament to kind of get a bit of rhythm back. Sarah Taylor had come back in. She scored her first 50 after being away for a year. I think some of the injuries kind of went away. So by the time we were playing the bigger teams, your South Africa, your Australia's, New Zealand as well, we were kind of feeling good again. And in those games, at no point did I think, in that Australia game, at no point did I think we were going to lose. It wasn't our best game at all. We were, I think when I got out, we were 110 for 5, which is not a great position to be in at all. But I think for me, the whole World Cup, you look back and you think we won it by a mile. We really didn't. But we just found a way. In particular, our most senior players, your Catherine Brunt, your Jenny Gunn, Laura Marsh, known for being outstanding bowlers, but they were batting kind of 7, 8, 9. They got us out of so many messes. That game, they got us up to, I don't know, you've probably got it there, but over 230 something. Brilliant partnership. They just found a way, just hung in there. They just knew. I think experience helps, obviously, but they got us up to something. We were like, now we can defend that. And it got close. It got very close, but we just genuinely believed that we could do it. We had a young player, like young spin bowler, Alex Hartley, who almost just had a knack of getting the big wicket in the opposition. I think she got made landing out quite cheaply, and we were just like, nah, this is us. This is us. Like, we were just so calm under pressure. Everyone knew their role. I think for us, when we did beat Australia at Bristol, that was a big one for us, that we've beaten the defending champions. We've beaten probably the best team in the world. And we know now we can beat anyone.
Because sometimes you see this perhaps in the Women's World Cup recently, where and we've had it in England rugby, where England played the All Blacks in 2019 in Tokyo and had their best game ever to beat like probably one of the favourites, and then the next game they kind of had this dip. How did you counter that?
Well, I think it just kept coming back to the same message of we're on a journey, we're building for something, and hopefully it's Lords. But it kind of was hard to not get a little bit giddy and get ahead of yourself. But I think that's the beauty a little bit of tournament cricket, is you move on quite quickly to the next game. Right, okay, what's the next opposition? What's their threat? Also, there was a couple of other little incentives. I think we wanted to top the group, or we wanted to definitely win our last game well, because we were in Bristol and been there for quite a while. But if we lost, we had a long trip back to Derby, and then if we won that, a long trip to London. And if we won, we stayed in Bristol, and our semi-finals in Bristol. So it was almost like that's the kind of mini motivator for that last game, to make sure that we saved ourselves that kind of travel and sore bodies. And at that point, you are getting run down a little bit. But it was always kind of about that goal. But the semi-final one was difficult because we'd kind of thrashed South Africa at Bristol, at the same ground the semi-final was at. I think Sarah Taylor and I had put on one of the biggest partnerships for the second wicket ever. We'd won quite easily. So you're kind of like, oh, right, well, one eye on the final here. And then India beat Australia, the favourites, the day before as well. And we'd heard that the final was going to be a sellout, 27,000 people at Lords. It had always been the goal, but none of us thought that was ever going to happen. I mean, years before that, you'd be literally people's parents and brothers and sisters coming to watch. That's it. And the fact that we knew that was coming, and it almost felt like, oh, it's India. They beat us in the first game. This is written for us to beat them in the final. That you have to stay in the moment. Like, well, it's there for the taking, but at the same time, we've got to beat South Africa. And the conditions had changed. The wickets were tired. It was a lot more difficult. But at the same time, I remember being incredibly nervous watching the kind of chase go on. But I didn't believe we were going to lose. It's just when you can't actually affect it when you're already out. it's quite nerve-wracking to watch. And I think there's lots of footage of me, Sarah, and Alex Hartley kind of like singing along to the music and like bouncing around because she just had so much nervous energy. But I think knowing that it was the likes of Anya Shrubsole walking out, who luckily is the complete opposite to me and doesn't play on emotion, is just incredibly calm, assesses the situation almost like a cricket calculator, and just she had no doubt in her mind what she was doing, and she obviously won the game for us with Jenny Gunn again. So it was some tight games, but I think a lot of belief from the team.
So there's this. How long was the gap between beating South Africa and then the final? We talk about
4 days, I think it was.
So you don't have a huge amount of time to reset, but by the same token, what's the vibe amongst the team at this stage? What are you feeling?
I think it was just sheer excitement, really. I think it was all uncharted waters of, well, there's going to be a big crowd. You know, we're at Lord's. This is everything we've wanted. It's we heard that they'd invited along. So we've won the World Cup, the Women's World Cup 4 times, but the last one, well, it was 2009, and then the previous one to that was 1993 and 1973, and they hadn't got any medals. They'd never been presented a medal. Very much an amateur era. Pretty much got a very small trophy, and I think they weren't even, one of them was at Lord's and they weren't even allowed in the pavilion because women weren't allowed in the pavilion at that time. So we'd heard that they were going to make a big show of that. It was going to be a celebration of women's cricket and where it's come to. But we kind of were like, right, let's tone it down for a couple of days. I think we went to watch a West End show. I think a couple of particular musical lovers went every night, actually. But, I certainly remember going to one, and it was just all about just trying to stay as calm as possible and focus on the kind of job at hand and what we'd done so brilliantly to get you there. But they seem to do it in every final we play in. There's always a video from the families the day before that's the one that kind of makes it feel very real.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that's quite an interesting point, having worked with a few teams that have gone on to achieve amazing things, where just before, especially in this scenario, it feels like it's sort of set up, the stage is set. Was there ever a fear for you or any of the team of sort of fluffing your lines, that if did those thoughts that we talked about in the Tammy V1 versus Tammy V2 ever come into your mind, or was that sort of just didn't happen?
Well, I'd actually gone through a bit of a bumpy ride in the World Cup itself. So I'd obviously done quite well the year before, had a really good summer in 2016 against Pakistan, and pretty good winter. And then I came in and I didn't score any runs in the first few games, and I was starting to be like, I was getting really twitchy, getting quite annoying, I think, for the coaches. Like, my batting sessions were getting like longer and longer. I was always someone that if things weren't going well, I could almost try harder and harder and harder. It got to the point that, like, on the morning of a game, I'd want the coach to try and throw or bowl pretty much every single one of their bowlers, and I'd almost like go through it physically, what I was going to do against all their bowlers. And they literally like, you really need to chill out. Yeah. And then I kind of had the breakthrough moment of that 100 against South Africa. And that was probably when I actually settled into the World Cup. Then got another couple of scores, a couple of 50s. Put on some really big partnerships with Nat Siver against New Zealand. So yeah, I kind of had refound that kind of confidence, and the girls used to kind of call it the Tammy strut. I'd kind of walk out. It was a fake it till you make it kind of thing. I still have it now, but it's kind of, you know, that's, for me, it's a performance, and you go out there and you put on a persona that's not necessarily who I actually am.
Sasha Fierce, isn't that Beyonce's one?
Yeah, exactly.
What, I mean, at the risk of opening up a whole can of worms, what did the Tammy strut involve?
Well, it's
Were you conscious you were doing it?
No, not really. It very much is about, performing and feeling confident. I think that was the big thing from the kind of 2013 thing. I wasn't projecting any confidence, so it was a fake it till you make it kind of thing. You know, I'm not a tall person, I'm not a particularly large person, but it was projecting something bigger than potentially I am, and almost projecting that confidence of, I'm going to take on the world, and I'm here, look at me. A little bit, I guess main character energy, it would be determined in this day and age, but that was the persona I had to get into, be confident and, you know, take on the bowlers and try and be dominant. And it's still something that works now.
So in that game, you were playing India, a chance to avenge the opening game loss. How did the game play out, and what was the overriding emotion when it finished?
Yes, I'll tell you how I saw the game, and then 6 months later, when I watched the highlights, what actually happened. So yeah, you speak about. I kind of speak about my routines, my normal what I do to try and. But day before a game, I'm really quite structured, regimented, real prepare. Really look into detail of what do bowlers do, what's my plan, what's my game plan, what am I going to do here, what if this happens, what if this happens. But for the final, I actually was feeling very nervous. I just was kind of getting into that point of like, oh no, it's a World Cup final, there's so many people here, what's going to happen, and getting a bit ahead of myself. And I used to write notes kind of the day before the game, and I just wrote, embrace it all, enjoy it, because how many World Cup finals you're going to play in at home. So normally I'm literally game face, singing the anthem, always get goosebumps when you sing the anthem, but normally just complete game face. This time I was laughing, I was joking, I was just having a great time. Nearly cried at one point because the kind of pioneer of women's cricket who literally got us World Cups, Rachel Hayhoe Flint had unfortunately passed away 6 months before, but she literally got us in the pavilion at Lord's, allowing women in. She used to play for England, captained them to the World Cup in 1973, and then she'd finish playing and then write up a newspaper article to get it in the paper for the next day. She got us funding for cricket, so she just absolute. If you don't know, kind of look up her story. She's an incredible woman. She'd unfortunately passed away, so we did a minute silent for her. Then they got the oldest surviving women's cricketer, Eileen Ash, who was 104.
Wow.
Who I'd have the pleasure of meeting a few years before.
She didn't get into the team.
She didn't get in the team, no, but she'd obviously played back in the day where they got a boat to Australia and were on a boat for 4 weeks, and you'd heard kind of her story and all that. She rang the 5-minute bell, and they then highlighted the World Cup winners of the past, and you just got hit with the momentum of this occasion and how big it was. And it wasn't just about us 11. It was absolutely nothing to do with that 11 that were taking the field that day. This was an absolute celebration of how far the game had come. 27,000 at Lord's, all cheering, well, more than half for India, to be perfectly honest. But having kind of the sisterhood that we talked about, bringing the past. We had a saying of take the cap forward. So we're taking the cap from that amateur era to the professional era and leave it better than how we received it and hand it on to the next generation. So having that previous generation there, ones we'd spoken about, we had a big dinner that they'd been invited to, and you were hearing that they had to buy their own blazers and pay to go on tour. And this was like my lifetime, the 90s. One of them couldn't afford it, and her PE teacher was the reason she got into cricket. She had played for England, so she gave her England blazer so she could go on England tour.
Wow. And
now we're getting paid, we're on TV, we're all this, sponsors, you name it. It's just mental. So that hit me. So I nearly cried. I was like, hang on a minute. No, you're not being that vulnerable. Like, stop that. Anyway, so embrace the day. That was my kind of motto. Go out there. I wanted to set the tone for the team. I can't remember if we won the toss or not, but we batted first. And I was like, I'm setting the tone for the team. And that was always kind of my motivation, my job was that's how I could lead in this group. Myself and Lauren Winfield, Twinfield, as they like to nickname us. We were quite the partnership. But yeah, I was going to show us how we were going to play this game, and I was going to make sure it wasn't timid, it wasn't shy, it wasn't reserved. It was going out there and taking it on and putting them under pressure. And I was lucky that I didn't face the first ball, but it was like a coliseum. They were like cheering. Julan Goswami running in, and she's such a giant of the game. Like, she's a giant and a giant of the game, and she's kind of had these languid run up, and it was just this dull like oh, and then this pause. That only you know what's about to happen, because you see Lauren hit the ball and then the cheer. It was a moment I will never experience. Obviously we now experience it more, but that was the first time I'd experienced that in it, and I was like, whoa, this is incredible. This is what you dream of as an 8-year-old. This is it. So that's probably a good thing that I wasn't the one hitting the ball, because I wouldn't have been
forgotten to play. Oh, okay,
But yeah, it does end up a nervy affair. We get off to a decent start. Lauren gets out. I then do what I'd done all tournament and hit a full toss down deep mid-wicket's throat and get out as well. Unfortunately, Heather gets out first ball, so it's a bit nervy. We've started well, but then they've clawed it back. Then there's a brilliant partnership between Sarah Taylor and Nat Siver. Then there's another couple of wickets, and Julian Goswami, we all thought was going to retire after this game. She's been playing since 2000. It's now 2017. She comes back on. She gets a wicket with her first ball of her second spell, and you're just like, oh no, it's written for her, isn't it? The fairy tale's written for her. I think she gets another wicket, and I'm like, no, she can't get Pfeiffer and win the game for him. She can't. Then again, like I said, the old guard, Jenny Gunn, Catherine Brunt, Laura Marsh, like they've done all season, just find a way to get us to something. And we get to, was it 219? Not that. We thought it was enough. We were like, nah, that could be enough. But I remember asking one of the commentators, I think Nasser Hussain, ex-England captain, was commentating. I was like, do you think we got enough? And he was like, yeah, if you bowl well. I was like, okay, yeah. Okay, cool. So again, we go out there and we're like, well, if we get a couple of early wickets, like, we'll be into this. So in the first game, Smriti Mandana, one of the best players in the world, one of the best players to watch, men or women, with the bat in hand. She's just an absolute glorious left-hander. Had taken us apart at Derby. She got 96 or something. We get her out cheaply really early on. Anya Shrubsole, and we're like, that's when I'm like, we've got this. Yeah. We've got this now. Then there's another big partnership. Poonam Raut and Mitali Raj. Mitali Raj is the captain. She's, again, another legend of the game. Ends up getting run out. I'm like, yeah, that's it now. We've got this. Harmanpreet Kaur comes in, who'd scored 170 not out against Australia, and that is completely the reason they won that game, that semi-final. Outrageous, and you're like, oh no, she could do it again. She hits 2 massive sixes into the grandstand, and you're like, no, she can't do it again. And I'm out at deep square, and Alex Hartley's bowling. I'm like, well, golden arms on. We're all right here. We're going to win this. They're going to give us a chance. And I'm literally sat there at deep square leg, and I'm thinking, there's a catch coming, actually, and it's going to Fran on my left or me here. And I'm not known as one of the best fielders, certainly not one of the best catchers. And normally I'd probably be like, I should probably swap with someone. And I was like, no, we've spoken about taking that step forward. If we make a mistake, if we're ever nervous, we step into it. So I was like, yeah, this catch is coming here. Literally the next over, what happens? Gets hit out to me at deep square leg. Harmanpreet Kaur, the big wicket, and I catch it. And I literally celebrate like I've never celebrated before. Because it was like, I saw it coming. I knew it was coming. I knew they were going to give us a chance. It's on. We're winning this game by a mile. It carries on. Anya comes back on, and the first 2 balls of that spell go for 4. And you can see Heather going, oh, bloody hell. This is getting close. Anya then proceeds to get the best figures ever in a final, 6 for 46, runs through them. I feel like we've won by about 30 runs. Absolutely wiped the floor with them. We won the game by a mile, never in doubt, always going to win. It was only 6 months later we won by what, 9?
9 runs.
I didn't know we won by 9 runs. I was that sure we were miles ahead. We were going to win.
Yeah.
That's how sure I was we were going to win. But yeah, 9 runs.
I mean, it looks close when you look at it on a piece of paper, but obviously I wasn't there playing. So.
Well, no, it was when you watch it back. Like, no wonder the crowd were crazy, because 1 minute they were shouting India, one corner was shouting India, one shouting England, and it was going backwards and forwards, and the tension was like real. And we dropped a catch. Jenny Gunn dropped a catch when they were 9 wickets down, obviously needing 10 to win. And it was the easiest catch anyone ever could have taken, but she dropped it, and you literally like, I'm running towards her going, yeah, we've won.
Oops.
And you just see Anya, and I think this is probably why Anya did so well on that day. She just goes, sorry about it. Next ball, bowled, won the World Cup.
And that moment, so a couple of questions really as we start to close up, but that moment, can you remember it with clarity now, even though it was 5-6 years ago? Can you remember your emotion in that moment? Was it? I've talked to many sports people when they've achieved what they've been setting out to achieve, and quite often the feeling is one of just pure relief. But I don't think that's what you're going to answer.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it was. I think there was so many different emotions. I was, definitely like high as a kite, jumping on everyone. I got an elbow to the face. Like, we were all just
got more injuries afterwards.
Yeah. Someone rolled an ankle. But no, I remember Catherine Brunt actually like went down on her knees and started crying. and I made it 10 times worse by pointing up at the boxes that the ECB had really nicely provided for our family. I was like, Catherine, they're looking. She's like, oh, no. So I made that one worse. But yeah, there was a lot of tears, and I think I was probably one of the only ones that didn't cry the entire evening. I just felt absolutely ecstatic, like dream come true, like just unbelievable. Yeah, literally, I think in sport, very few people get any kind of fairy tale, and particularly, yes, I'm getting towards the end of my career. A lot of my colleagues are now retiring, and you kind of like, not many get a fairy tale. But that whole journey felt like, for me, a fairy tale.
And sort of final question, again, I feel like I know what the answer is going to be, but you've had some pretty mega personal milestones in cricket recently. How do they feel different to, say, the 2017 World Cup win and the sense of team and camaraderie? Are they accented by who you're achieving those things with? I'm curious as to the impact of team on individual performance for you.
Yeah, I think it's very different now. I think I was very young back then, and everything was about winning. And I actually had a tough time for a good couple of years after that. I think Leah Williamson of the Lionesses, I've heard her speak about how she feels like she's going to chase that feeling of winning the Euros for the rest of her life. And I think that it rings so true for me, that I don't think I'm ever going to have another day like that. And there's been some that have come close, but I feel like you're constantly comparing everything to that. Yeah. And it makes life incredibly difficult. And in 2018, I think I scored 300s back to back, playing really well. But for me, it was like, I did my job today. Yeah. And there was no like real emotion. But so then I did a lot of soul searching. It became more about not just winning. It became about what legacy you're going to leave, how you are as a teammate, what people are going to say about how you impacted them and what you offer, and the kind of greater purpose of, I think, women's sport, women's cricket is in such a position at the moment that, we really can take the cap forward and we really can hand it to the next generation in a way that's greater than just wins or losses or runs. Yeah. So yeah, for me, it's more, there's a much bigger purpose now, and very much around doing it for your teammates and what you can create is something special as opposed to just an outcome.
Thank you so much for coming in, Tammy, and sharing your story and talking about the World Cup and talking, about your individual performances, but also really how you came together as a team to win and do something monumental for both women's cricket and cricket in general. So thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.